I never thought I'd make the drive that Thanksgiving. Truth be told, holidays had felt empty for me ever since Ruth passed away. She was the heart of our family, the one who filled the house with warmth and laughter. Without her, every Thanksgiving had turned into just another day. But that year, something inside me pushed me to go. Maybe it was Daniel. My grandson, I hadn't seen him in months. Clara, my daughter, had remarried, and since then the visits had grown fewer. I used to get calls, pictures, little updates about how Daniel was doing at school. But after she married Victor, the new man in her life, those updates slowed to almost nothing. And when they did come, they always sounded off. I couldn't explain it exactly, but there was something in Daniel's eyes whenever I saw him. A quiet sadness. That morning, I sat alone at my kitchen table with a cup of black coffee, staring at the calendar. Thanksgiving Day. Ruth would have wanted me to go. She always said family was worth the effort, no matter how far the road. So I packed my old leather bag, grabbed my coat, and decided I would surprise them. No calls, no warnings. Just me, showing up at Clara's house to spend the holiday with my family. The drive was long, the kind where you have too much time to think. The sky was heavy with gray clouds, and snow started to fall as I crossed into Cincinnati. The roads were slick, the kind of dangerous slick where every turn of the wheel made your heart jump. But I pressed on, gripping the steering wheel like my life depended on it. All the while, my thoughts drifted back to Daniel. The last time I saw him, he had asked me in that small voice of his, "Grandpa, can I come stay with you sometime?" I had laughed it off then, told him, "Of course, Daniel, anytime." But I hadn't taken it seriously. Now as I drove, his words replayed in my head heavier than ever. When I finally pulled off the main road and turned into Clara's neighborhood, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of me was excited. Maybe this visit would remind Clara of the family she came from, of the way her mother raised her. Maybe we could laugh again, eat together, remember Ruth with love instead of silence. But another part of me deep down was uneasy. As I parked in front of the house, I sat there for a moment, staring at the warm lights glowing through the windows. Inside, I imagined the smell of turkey, the sound of plates clinking, the chatter of family around the table. I wanted to believe that was what waited for me, but something in my gut told me this visit wasn't going to be what I hoped for. I took a deep breath, stepped out of the car, and tightened my coat around me as the cold wind bit at my face. I walked up the path, each step crunching in the fresh snow, and paused at the porch. "Ruth," I whispered into the night, "I hope I'm doing the right thing." I knocked on the door, a firm, steady knock. No answer. I knocked again. Still nothing. That was strange. With all those lights on, I expected laughter, movement, something. Then I heard it, a faint sound not from inside the house, but from the side of the porch. A cough. A small, weak cough, and when I turned my head, my eyes landed on something that froze me to the core. There, sitting on the steps in the freezing cold, was Daniel. My heart dropped. He wasn't wearing a coat, just a thin sweater, his arms crossed tightly against his chest. His little face was red from the biting air, his breath coming out in shaky clouds. He looked up at me, startled, and for a moment I saw relief wash over him. "Grandpa," he whispered, his voice trembling. In that instant, I knew this Thanksgiving visit would not be what I expected. I hadn't just come for turkey and family. I had come to uncover something far darker. The road stretched long and endless before me, a ribbon of gray cutting through fields of white. Snow was falling harder now, covering everything in a quiet blanket. The wipers of my old truck squeaked back and forth, struggling to keep the windshield clear. Every few minutes, the tires slipped just enough to make my stomach twist. But I kept driving. Nothing was going to stop me from reaching Clara's house that day. As the miles rolled on, my thoughts grew heavier. It had been a long time since I had driven this road, and memories started creeping in uninvited. Memories of Ruth sitting beside me, humming softly to the car radio, her hand resting gently on my arm. We used to make this same trip together for every holiday, full of laughter and stories. Now it was just me and the sound of the engine, and the silence felt louder than ever. I thought of Daniel again. That boy had always been the brightest part of my life since Ruth's passing. He reminded me of her in so many ways. The way his eyes lit up when he laughed, the curiosity in his questions, the kindness in his heart. But there was something else too, a weight in his small shoulders that no child should carry. The last time I visited, I noticed small things. Bruises on his arm that he brushed off as falling on the playground, the way he flinched whenever Victor raised his voice even if it wasn't directed at him. And that one night while Clara and Victor thought he was asleep, Daniel had crept into my room. He sat on the edge of the bed and whispered, "Grandpa, do you think it's my fault when bad things happen?" That question still burned in my chest. Children don't ask things like that unless someone has made them believe it. I had wanted to press him, to ask him what he meant, but he had quickly changed the subject, telling me he was just tired. And like a fool, I let it go. As I steered through the storm, guilt weighed on me. Had I ignored the signs? Had I turned away from the truth because it was easier to pretend everything was fine? Maybe Ruth had been trying to nudge me all along, her memory urging me not to close my eyes. The snow grew thicker, turning the road slippery and dangerous. A truck passed me going the opposite way, spraying slush across my windshield. I slowed down, gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. "Easy, Sam," I muttered to myself.
"Keep it steady."
You've driven worse, but the real storm wasn't outside. It was inside me. A storm of doubt, anger, and something else, fear. Fear of what I might find at the end of this road. Still, a part of me clung to hope. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe Clara and Victor were taking good care of Daniel, and my worries were nothing but old man paranoia. Maybe I'd walk into that house and see a warm family gathered around the table, just as it should be. I wanted that to be true. I prayed for it to be true. But another part of me remembered Victor's face the first time I met him. Sharp eyes, a tight smile that never reached them. He was polite enough, but there was a hardness about him, a coldness I couldn't ignore. Clara had brushed off my concerns back then. "He's just serious, Dad," she had said. "He's good to us." Good. I wanted to believe her. I tried to. But Daniel's silence, the sadness in his voice, told me a different story. The road signs began to look familiar as I neared the city limits. My hands were sore from holding the wheel so tight, but I pushed on. The thought of Daniel's small voice, "Grandpa, can I come stay with you sometime?" echoed in my mind again. Why hadn't I taken him seriously? Why had I laughed it off, treating it like a game? I swallowed hard, blinking away the sting in my eyes. I had failed him once. I couldn't fail him again. As I approached Clara's neighborhood, the streets were lined with houses glowing softly with Christmas lights, even though it was still Thanksgiving. Families were gathering, cars parked in driveways, laughter spilling from living rooms. All around me it looked like the perfect holiday scene, but I knew better. I knew appearances could lie. I slowed down as I turned onto Clara Street. There it was, the two-story house with its white shutters and tidy front yard. It looked warm and welcoming from the outside, just like the other homes. But the uneasy feeling in my gut only grew stronger. I parked in front, killed the engine, and sat there for a long moment staring at the house. The snow was piling on the hood of the truck, melting slowly from the warmth beneath. My breath fogged up the glass as I whispered to myself, "All right, Sam, time to see the truth," and with that, I opened the door, stepped into the icy air, and began the walk toward the house. Little did I know, what I was about to discover would change everything I believed about family, love, and what it truly means to protect a child. The cold hit me like a slap the moment I stepped out of the truck. Snow crunched beneath my boots as I walked toward Clara's house. From the windows I could see warm light glowing, the kind of light that usually meant comfort, family, and laughter. But the closer I got, the heavier my chest felt. Something was wrong. I climbed the steps to the porch and knocked firmly on the door. Once, twice, 3 times, no answer. Inside, I thought I heard faint laughter, the clinking of plates. Surely they'd heard me. I knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. That's when I heard it. A small, weak cough. It didn't come from inside the house. It came from the side, near the steps of the porch. I turned and my heart nearly stopped. There, sitting on the bottom step in the freezing cold, was Daniel. Daniel? My voice cracked. He looked up at me, his cheeks red from the icy wind, his little body shivering. He wore only a thin sweater and jeans, no coat, no gloves, no hat. His lips were pale, trembling as he tried to smile. "Grandpa," he whispered, his voice barely louder than the snow falling around us. I rushed down the steps and knelt beside him. "What on earth are you doing out here, son?" "You'll freeze." I pulled off my coat and wrapped it around his shoulders. His small body leaned into me, desperate for warmth. I can't go inside," he said, his teeth chattering. My stomach dropped. "What do you mean you can't go inside?" His eyes darted toward the glowing windows, then back at me. He hesitated, as if saying the words out loud might get him into even more trouble. Finally, he whispered, "Victor said I had to stay out here. I ruined dinner. I burned the turkey a little, so this is my punishment." For a moment I couldn't breathe. I stared at him, hoping I had misheard. But the sadness in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. "Your punishment?" I repeated slowly, anger rising in my chest like fire. "Daniel, you're just a boy. No one should be left outside in weather like this. Not for any reason." Tears welled in his eyes, and he quickly looked down, ashamed. "It's not the first time," he admitted softly. Sometimes he makes me stay in the garage. Or the basement, just when I mess up." The words hit me like a hammer. My fists clenched so hard I could feel my nails digging into my palms. I wanted to storm inside that house right then and there, drag Victor out and make him understand what it meant to be a man, what it meant to protect instead of harm. But I forced myself to stay calm, at least for Daniel's sake. I brushed the snow from his hair and tilted his chin up so he could look at me. "Listen to me, Daniel. None of this is your fault. Do you hear me? You are not bad. You did nothing to deserve this." His eyes filled with tears and he nodded, though I could tell he didn't fully believe me. Behind us, I could hear the faint sound of laughter again, Clara's laughter. My daughter's voice mixed with Victor's, echoing through the walls as they enjoyed their Thanksgiving meal, while her son sat outside in the freezing cold. The anger inside me boiled hotter than ever. Clara, my little girl, the one Ruth and I had raised with love and care. How could she allow this? How could she sit at that table knowing her son was out here suffering? I pulled Daniel closer, letting him bury his face into my chest. "I'm here now," I whispered into his hair. "I won't let this happen again." He trembled in my arms, but for the first time I felt him relax just a little, as if my presence gave him some small comfort. The snow swirled around us, settling on my shoulders and in Daniel's hair, but I didn't care. All I could think about was the boy in my arms and the truth I had just uncovered. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a one-time punishment. This was abuse, and it had been happening for longer than I wanted to admit. I thought back to all the little signs, the bruises, the flinches, the late-night questions Daniel asked. I had brushed them aside, told myself I was overthinking. But I wasn't. Deep down I had known. I just didn't want to face it. Well, I was facing it now, and I made a silent promise right there in the cold night air. This ends tonight, no more excuses. No more silence. I stood up, pulling Daniel with me, keeping my coat around his shivering body. I glanced back at the glowing windows, my jaw tightening. They thought they could keep me on the outside, just like they kept Daniel. But I wasn't going anywhere. Not until I made things right. I held Daniel close, trying to warm him with my coat as the cold wind whipped around us. His small body shivered against me, and every tremor filled me with more anger. I wanted answers, real answers, not silence. "Daniel," I said gently, "tell me the truth. Has this happened before? Has Victor left you out here other times?" He hesitated. His eyes darted toward the door as if Victor might burst through at any second. Then he nodded slowly. Yes, Grandpa. Sometimes it's outside, sometimes it's the garage or the basement. He says it's the only way I'll learn. I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. The words cut me deep. Learn what? You're just a child, I muttered under my breath. Daniel's voice cracked. Last week I spilled juice on the table. He locked me in the garage all night. It was so cold I could see my breath. But Mom said it was discipline, not punishment. She said Victor only wants me to grow up strong. I felt my chest tighten. Discipline? That wasn't discipline. That was cruelty. That was abuse. I crouched so I could look him straight in the eye. Daniel, listen to me. None of this is your fault. You are not bad. You do not deserve this treatment. He blinked quickly, trying not to cry. But Mom says it's normal. She says all kids get punished. I shook my head firmly. No, son. That's not normal. Punishment is when you lose television time or you can't play outside for a while. But being locked away, left in the cold, that's not punishment. That's wrong. I could see the relief in his face when I said those words. Like he'd been waiting for someone, anyone, to tell him the truth. I pulled him tighter under my arm and looked back at the glowing windows of the house. Inside, I imagined the table set with steaming food, Clara laughing with Victor and the others. My daughter, my own flesh and blood, was sitting in there pretending this was all okay. The realization hit me like a punch. This wasn't new. It had been going on for months, maybe years, and I had ignored every little sign Daniel tried to show me, every bruise, every quiet word, every sad look. He had been asking for help and I hadn't listened. The guilt settled heavy in my chest. But with it came something else, rage. Not wild, reckless rage, but a steady fire that burned hotter with every breath. I looked back down at Daniel. How long has this been happening? I asked softly. He shrugged his thin shoulders. Since Mom married Victor. He says I'm not his son, so I have to earn my place. If I mess up, I lose it. Those words nearly broke me. A child should never feel like they have to earn love, earn warmth, earn the right to sit at the table. Ruth would have wept if she had heard this. I took a deep breath and made a silent promise. It ends tonight. No more cold nights for Daniel. No more silence from me. Daniel, I said, steadying my voice, you don't have to be afraid anymore. I'm here now, and I'm not going to let this continue. He looked up at me, his eyes wide and searching. Do you promise, Grandpa? I put my hand on his shoulder, firm and sure. I promise. On your grandmother's name, I promise. The boy nodded, and for the first time that night I saw a flicker of hope in his eyes. I stood, pulling him to his feet. His small hand slipped into mine, cold but trusting. Together, we turned toward the front door. Inside that house sat a man who thought cruelty was strength and a woman who convinced herself it was love. Tonight they would hear the truth, and tonight, Daniel would know he wasn't alone anymore. I stood in the driveway, the cold still biting through my coat, and watched Daniel's tiny frame shake from the freezing wind. Every word he had told me kept echoing in my head. The reality of what he had suffered hit me harder than I expected. All the missed signs, all the subtle cries for help, I had ignored them. I had failed him before, but I wasn't going to fail again. The truth settled like a stone in my chest. The abuse had been going on for months, maybe years. Victor had been cruel, punishing Daniel for the smallest mistakes, leaving him outside in the snow, locking him in the garage or basement. And my own daughter, Clara, who should have protected her son, had allowed it to happen. She excused Victor's actions, calling them discipline, pretending it was for Daniel's good. I felt a deep burning guilt. I should have seen it sooner. I remembered the times Daniel had mentioned being left alone or being scared. I had brushed it off, telling myself he was exaggerating. And now, standing here in the cold, I realized how wrong I had been. Daniel looked up at me with wide, anxious eyes. Grandpa, are you mad? He asked softly. Mad? Yes, I was mad. Not just mad, furious. But it wasn't a blind rage. It was a focused, steady fire that demanded action. I clenched my fists and took a deep breath. letting the anger sharpen my resolve instead of letting it explode uncontrollably. "Daniel," I said firmly, "I am very angry, but not at you. You haven't done anything wrong. I am angry at Victor for hurting you, and at the situation that allowed this to continue, but I promise you from this moment it ends." I pulled him closer, wrapping my coat around his small body, trying to shield him from the cold that had become all too familiar to him. His shivering eased slightly under my warmth. I knew the emotional cold he had lived in for so long would take much longer to heal, but at least now he would not face it alone. I thought about Clara. I loved her, but her silence, her excuses, her willingness to ignore her son's suffering. It was a betrayal I could not overlook. I realized that protecting Daniel meant confronting her, too. She had to understand the consequences of inaction. I felt the fire of determination build inside me. This was no longer just about anger or guilt. It was about justice. Daniel deserved to be safe, to feel loved, to be treated like a child should be treated. No one, not Victor, not anyone, could take that from him again. I knelt down to Daniel's level. "Listen carefully, Daniel. From this moment on, I am responsible for you. I will not let anyone hurt you again. Not tonight, not ever. Do you understand?" He nodded, his small hands gripping mine tightly. I could feel his fear slowly turning into a fragile hope. That hope was what I needed to hold on to. It was the reason I could act with clarity and strength. I took a deep breath and looked back at the house. Inside, I knew Victor and Clara were unaware of the storm about to hit. I imagined the comfortable scene inside. A warm dining room, a table full of food, laughter and ignorance of the suffering just outside. The contrast made my blood boil, but I couldn't let anger cloud my judgment. I needed to act decisively with purpose. I had to stop the abuse, protect Daniel, and make sure justice was clear and undeniable. This was not the time for hesitation. I stood up, holding Daniel's hand firmly. My mind was made up. We were going inside. Whatever awaited us, whatever confrontation came next, I would face it without fear. The time for regret was over. The time for action had arrived, and in that moment I made another silent promise. Nothing, no one, would ever hurt Daniel again if I could stop it. I would confront Victor. I would confront Clara, and I would bring Daniel to safety no matter the cost. The icy wind could not touch the fire that now burned inside me. It was a fire of love, of justice, and of the determination of a grandfather who had finally realized the full truth, and would not rest until it was corrected. I stood at the doorstep, the cold from outside still clinging to my coat, but it was nothing compared to the heat building inside me. I looked down at Daniel, who clung to my hand, and I knew there was no turning back. I had waited too long. I had ignored too many signs. Tonight I would act, and I would not let fear stop me. I raised my hand, and without hesitation I kicked the door. The sound echoed through the house, startling everyone inside. Dinner paused. The clatter of plates and the hum of conversation froze in an instant. I could see the surprise and confusion on their faces. But what hit me harder than their shock was the sight that met my eyes. Daniel's mother, Clara, and Victor, sitting comfortably at the table, eating as if the outside world didn't exist. And there, outside in the freezing cold just moments ago, was the truth of what Daniel endured. "Daniel," I called softly, keeping my voice calm, steady. He stepped forward slightly, looking small but safe at my side. My heart ached seeing him this way, but it also steeled my resolve. Victor's eyes narrowed at me. "What do you think you're doing?" He barked, trying to sound authoritative, but there was a flicker of uncertainty. I didn't answer. Words alone weren't enough. I took a deep breath, my gaze sweeping the room. Clara looked confused, uneasy, and yet defensive. I could see her mind working, trying to justify what she had allowed. But it was too late for excuses. The truth was there, plain for everyone to see. I stepped fully inside, holding Daniel's hand firmly. This ends tonight, I said, my voice carrying through the room. No more hiding. No more pretending. Daniel has suffered enough, and I will not allow it to continue. Victor leaned back in his chair, smirking. It's my house, my rules. I'm teaching him responsibility, he said, as if punishment justified cruelty. He's not even my real son. Why should I care if he's cold or scared? I felt a surge of anger, but I kept it controlled. My fists clenched at my sides, but my voice stayed steady, sharp. Responsibility isn't learned through fear. It isn't learned by locking a child in a garage or leaving him out in the snow. You are abusing him, and I will not let you continue. Clara's face paled, but instead of standing with her son, she tried to defend Victor. It's discipline, she said weakly. I'm teaching him lessons too. You don't understand. I shook my head slowly. No, Clara, this isn't discipline. It's cruelty. And by allowing it, you've betrayed him. You've betrayed your own child. The room grew tense, the air thick with unspoken guilt and anger. I could see other family members shifting uncomfortably, sensing the gravity of the moment. This wasn't just a fight between adults, it was the confrontation of truth against excuses, love against neglect. I stepped closer to the table, still holding Daniel's hand. You owe him an apology. Not just words, but actions. You must understand the harm you've caused and change it, or there will be consequences. Victor laughed, but it was bitter, unconvincing. Consequences? What can you do? You're just one man. I didn't flinch. I held his gaze steadily. I can do what's right. I can protect Daniel. And I will. Starting now. Daniel squeezed my hand tightly, a silent message of trust. I felt the weight of responsibility settle fully on my shoulders. This confrontation wasn't just about anger or guilt. It was about justice, courage, and love. It was about ensuring Daniel would never feel unsafe again in a home that should have protected him. For the first time, I truly saw the full truth. The abuse, the neglect, the lies, the betrayal. And in that moment I knew that nothing Victor or Clara could say would erase what I had witnessed. But I also knew that action could make a difference. Action could save Daniel. I took another deep breath and said firmly, Daniel, it's time to go. You deserve better. You deserve love, safety, and care, and I will give you that. As I led him away from the table, I felt a mixture of relief and determination. The confrontation had begun. The truth had been laid bare, and the battle for justice for Daniel's safety had finally started. This was not just a fight against Victor. It was a fight against fear, neglect, and betrayal, and I was ready to see it through, no matter the resistance. After leading Daniel away from the table, I turned back to face Victor and Clara. The tension in the room was thick, almost suffocating. Victor's face was red. Not from anger alone, but from the shock of being challenged openly. I could see him trying to regain control, trying to convince himself and everyone else that what he was doing was justified. Victor stood up abruptly, slamming his hands on the table. Listen here, he shouted, his voice echoing across the room. This is my house, my rules. You have no right to come in here and accuse me of anything. I stayed calm, letting him rant. I knew that in moments like these, anger often spoke louder than reason. But I also knew the truth, and the truth was on my side. I took a slow, deep breath and met his glare. Victor, I said steadily, being the head of a house doesn't give you the right to harm a child. Daniel is a human being. He deserves care, respect, and safety. Victor scoffed and leaned back in his chair, trying to regain an air of superiority. Care, respect, safety, he said, mocking my words. I'm teaching him responsibility. That's what a parent does. You think spoiling him is love? Love is preparing him for the real world. I shook my head, my voice rising slightly but still controlled. No, Victor. Responsibility is not learned through fear. It's not earned by freezing a child outside or locking him in a room for hours. You're confusing fear with respect, cruelty with discipline. Daniel should not have to suffer for mistakes that any child could make. Clara spoke up, trying to defend him. He's just teaching him lessons. Daniel needs to learn consequences. You're overreacting, Samuel. I turned to her, my eyes firm. Clara, consequences are part of life, yes. But no lesson is worth breaking a child's spirit. What you call lessons are punishments designed to scare and hurt him. That is abuse, and it cannot be excused by calling it discipline. Victor slammed his fist on the table again. You don't understand. I'm not cruel. I'm firm. I have to make him respect rules, respect authority. I stepped closer, my voice sharp but calm. Firmness is guiding a child, not instilling fear. Authority is teaching with wisdom, not terror. Look at Daniel. Look at what your methods have done to him. A child should never beg to go inside his own home or be afraid of the people who are supposed to love him. Victor's jaw tightened.
He's not my real son.
He's not blood.
Why should I care if he gets cold? He doesn't belong here the way I see it. This is my house. My chest tightened at his words. The cruelty, the disregard for humanity, it was shocking. But I knew anger alone wouldn't change the situation. I had to show clarity, conviction, and an unwavering determination to protect Daniel. Victor, I said, taking a deliberate step forward, being blood doesn't give you the right to harm anyone. Daniel is a child who needs protection. He deserves love and safety no matter what you think. He laughed bitterly, shaking his head as if my words were jokes. Love and safety? That's for weak people. I'm preparing him for life. The world is harsh. He needs to learn now. I met his gaze steadily, refusing to back down. No. Daniel's childhood is not a training ground for fear. The world is harsh enough without the people who are supposed to love him making it worse. I won't let you continue this. I will protect him. I will ensure he knows real care, real discipline, real guidance. Clara looked down at her hands, silent for the first time. But Victor's stubbornness remained unbroken. He leaned forward, trying to intimidate me, his voice low and threatening. You think you can just take him? You think you can tell me what to do in my house? I held his stare firmly, unwavering. I don't need permission. I need to do what's right. And what's right is keeping Daniel safe. You can argue, you can resist, you can try to convince yourself that cruelty is discipline. But the truth is clear, and I will act on it. Victor glared at me for a moment, his face a mask of defiance, disbelief, and perhaps even fear. I could feel the weight of the moment, the clash between his distorted sense of authority and the real responsibility of a caregiver. This was more than words. This was a reckoning, and he could not avoid it. Finally, I said calmly but firmly, Victor, you have a choice. Change your ways, acknowledge the harm you've caused, and start treating Daniel with the care he deserves. Or I will ensure he leaves here safely and authorities will see the truth. Your choices have consequences. For a moment the room was silent, the tension almost unbearable. I looked at Daniel standing quietly beside me, trusting me completely. That trust gave me strength. Victor may defend himself, may argue, may try to intimidate, but justice and love were on our side, and in that moment, I realized something important. No matter how loud he shouted, no matter how many excuses he made, the truth could not be hidden. Daniel's suffering could not be erased, but it could be ended. And I was determined to end it. After Victor had defended his actions, the room was thick with tension. Clara was still quiet, looking down at her hands, unsure of what to say. Daniel stood beside me, shivering slightly but holding his head high. I could feel his fear, but also his trust in me. That trust gave me the courage to act. Victor leaned back in his chair, trying to regain his composure. His face was red, his chest heaving from the fight of words. But I could see cracks in his defiance. He wanted to appear strong, in control, but deep down he knew I wasn't going to let this continue. I took a slow breath, keeping my voice calm but firm. Victor, this ends now. Daniel has suffered enough. Your rules, your so-called discipline, this is not acceptable. You cannot continue to hurt a child and call it training. He sneered. I'm teaching him respect. He will understand one day. You don't see the value in my methods. I shook my head. No, what you call respect is fear. What you call discipline is cruelty, and Daniel has already learned enough of it. I looked directly at Daniel, then back at Victor. I am giving you one chance to do the right thing. Apologize to Daniel. Admit your mistakes. Treat him with the care he deserves. Victor laughed bitterly, leaning forward. Apologize? To a child who isn't even mine? Never. He is weak and you're spoiling him. He needs to understand the world is not kind. He needs me! I clenched my fists but kept my voice steady. The world is harsh, yes, but children should never face that harshness from the people who are supposed to protect them. Your control, your fear tactics, they are not love, and they never will be. At that moment, the tension in the room became almost unbearable. Clara shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Victor's face was twisted with anger, disbelief, and maybe even a hint of fear. He realized he could not easily win this confrontation, not when the truth was so clear. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so that every word cut through the tension. Victor, listen carefully. You have a choice. You can admit the harm you've caused, change your ways, and start caring for Daniel properly. Or I will take him out of here, and the authorities will see what you've done. You cannot hide from this anymore. Victor slammed his hand on the table, trying to intimidate me. You can try, but I will fight you. This is my house. I have power here. I met his glare without flinching. Power is meaningless if it's used to hurt others. The only thing that matters is responsibility. Responsibility to protect, to guide, to care. You have failed in every way, and I will not let you continue. For a tense moment, it seemed like Victor might try to physically confront me, but I stood firm, calm, and unafraid. I could see Daniel looking at me with hope, and that gave me all the strength I needed. Then I raised my voice slightly, commanding the room. Victor, step aside. Daniel is leaving with me. This abuse ends today. You cannot stop it. You may argue, yell, or pretend this is unfair, but the truth is on our side and justice will be done. Victor's face contorted with rage, and Clara finally spoke, but her voice was weak. Victor, maybe we should just... She trailed off, realizing for the first time that our stand was unshakable. Victor looked around the room, finally seeing that he was alone in defending his cruelty. No one else supported him. His defiance was collapsing. I could see it in his eyes, realization, maybe even panic. I turned to Daniel and knelt beside him. Come on, Daniel. Let's go home. He nodded, relief flooding his face. I put a reassuring hand on his shoulder. This was more than just leaving a house, it was leaving fear, neglect, and pain behind. Victor tried to shout again, but his words were weak, powerless against the certainty in my voice. Daniel was leaving, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. As we walked out together, I could see the look of defeat on Victor's face. The showdown was over. The battle of cruelty versus care had been decided. Daniel was safe, and for the first time in a long time, he could feel that safety, that protection, and that love. After the intense confrontation with Victor, the house felt strangely quiet. Clara stayed in her chair, avoiding eye contact, and Victor slumped back as if he had lost all energy to argue. But for me, the moment was clear. This was the turning point. I could not leave Daniel in that house another day, not when he had suffered so much already. I had made the decision. He was coming home with me. I knelt beside Daniel and whispered, "We're leaving now. You don't have to stay here anymore." His eyes filled with a mixture of relief and fear. Relief because he knew he was finally safe. Fear because leaving meant stepping out of the only home he had ever known. But I reassured him, holding his hand, and he slowly nodded. Turning to Victor, I said firmly, "Pack your excuses somewhere else. Daniel is leaving with me, and if you try to stop us, the authorities will step in." I could see the anger in Victor's eyes, but there was also a flicker of hesitation. He realized he could no longer control this situation. Clara, still unsure, finally spoke. "Samuel, maybe this is best for him. He deserves a safe place." Her voice was quiet but sincere, and for the first time, she admitted the truth of what Daniel had endured. Victor's silence confirmed that even he knew he could no longer defend his cruel actions. I helped Daniel gather a small bag of his belongings. There weren't many, but each item represented pieces of his life that he could carry with him. a little comfort from a home that had often felt cold and unsafe. As he packed, I told him, "Everything that's happened here is not your fault. You are brave. You have survived, and now you will have a chance to be happy." His small smile gave me hope. Walking down the stairs, I could see the faces of Victor and Clara. Victor's defiance had melted into frustration and fear, while Clara seemed quietly ashamed, perhaps realizing that ignoring the abuse had allowed it to continue. But the important thing was that Daniel was leaving, and this time, he would not be turned away or punished for being himself. Outside, the cold air hit us, but it felt different this time. It didn't sting or threaten. It felt like freedom. Daniel looked up at the sky, taking a deep breath, and I could see him beginning to relax. I promised him that home now meant safety, love, and care. No one would harm him under my watch. On the way home, I reflected on the events that had brought us here. The confrontation had not been easy, and it had taken courage to face Victor and Clara. But it was necessary. True responsibility is not about power or control. It is about care, protection, and love. And in that moment, I realized how crucial it was to stand up for what is right, even when it feels frightening or difficult. At home, Daniel finally had a chance to breathe fully. He unpacked his bag, arranged his small belongings, and looked around at a safe environment. I explained to him that home was a place to grow, learn, and feel loved, not a place to fear. Slowly, I could see his confidence returning. Reflecting on everything that had happened, I understood the key themes of this experience. 1. Family betrayal and neglect can happen in ways that seem hidden or disguised as discipline. Daniel had been punished not because he had done anything truly wrong, but because Victor wanted to assert control, and Clara allowed it. Recognizing these forms of abuse is important, because children often cannot speak up for themselves. 2. Courage and love are powerful forces. Standing up against cruelty is not easy, but when someone trusts you to protect them, that responsibility becomes even more meaningful. By acting decisively, I was able to give Daniel the safety and care he deserved, showing him that true family is not just about living under the same roof. It is about genuine love, support, and protection. 3. Justice matters. Abusers may try to justify their actions, claim authority, or intimidate others, but their actions cannot erase the harm they've caused. Confronting abuse directly and protecting the vulnerable is a moral responsibility, and even when it feels risky, it is the right thing to do. Finally, the experience highlighted the importance of awareness and attentiveness. I had ignored hints of Daniel's suffering before, thinking perhaps he was exaggerating or imagining things. But listening carefully and acting on what children share is essential. Neglect, even if unintentional, can have lasting effects. Acting quickly can prevent further harm and bring real change. As I watched Daniel smile, laugh, and feel safe for the first time in a long while, I felt a deep sense of relief and fulfillment. The journey had been difficult, the confrontation intense, and the decisions weighty, but seeing a child safe and happy made it all worthwhile, and so, the story ends with a simple but important message. Courage, care, and justice can overcome fear and cruelty. Protect those who cannot protect themselves. Listen, act, and never ignore the signs of suffering. True family is built on love, respect, and safety, not fear, control, or punishment. When we stand up for what is right, we give hope and freedom to those who need it most.